Okay. I think I've got all of the technology working where it needs to be. So I've just been hanging out this evening and working on Etsy listings for some stuff that I'm adding to my Etsy shop. So trying to get some of my woodworking stuff out there in a timely fashion. The problem is that the part I enjoy is the making it, not the listing it. The listing it is drudgery, and so, but if I don't list it, people can't buy it, which is kind of a problem. Yeah. So, so what's new and exciting for everybody tonight? We're now 5 days into Lent, I suppose, and we all survived the loss of an hour of sleep going into daylight savings time. So surely somebody has some kind of feelings about something here, or something they want to talk about tonight. Otherwise, you're welcome to hang out with me while I continue to work on Etsy listings, but it's going to be quite boring. Slowly getting over a viral infection that turned into laryngitis. Ooh, no fun. My mother-in-law, who lives with us, laryngitis was a major symptom of COVID for her, both of the times that she contracted COVID. And even now, over a year since her last case, she still occasionally has problems with her voice. Oh, good. I'm glad that the meditation session was good. I hope that is, well, hello there. Okay, done. So, 3 new listings in the Etsy shop. Leprechaun gnomes, protest gnomes, and salt shakers. I am good, Nuggie. I have had a fairly quiet day. Been actually working pretty hard in the shop lately, so I took today as just kind of a down day. Just like I said, wrapping up some Etsy notification or some Etsy listings and relaxing a little bit and not worrying too much about being super productive. Well, after worship this morning. Hey, Mark, good to see you. I'm glad that you happened to find me while scrolling. I try to go live on Sunday evenings, sometime between 9 and 9:30. It doesn't always happen, but that's the goal anyhow. Well, we certainly don't want anybody ripping any hair out. I did. I just put a caramel hard candy in my mouth. My throat's a little dry this evening. Oh, I'm glad, Melissa. Ironically, we had a little bit of a bobble with our uh, YouTube feed this morning. The TikTok was fine, but we had a bobble with our YouTube feed that was completely beyond our control because we lost power at the church for about 15 to 20 seconds right in the middle of the second reading. So the way our order of service works, there's the first reading, a psalm, a second reading, and then I read the gospel, and then I preach. And this morning during the second reading, the power went out. So the reader finished the reading, and then we basically just pushed pause, not so much for the sake of the sermon, but because the youth choir was singing. So we just sort of pushed pause on the service for a few minutes. I told some cheesy jokes while the power came back and we got everything booted back up, so that we could have the youth choir as part of the service on YouTube, and then my sermon. So, well, thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. It's always, I think, a little bit challenging with these stories that come around every year. So our the lectionary that we use for worship. So a lectionary is a collection of readings of, in this case, scripture readings, and the one that we use is called the Revised Common Lectionary, which uses a 3-year cycle. Why we have a 3-year cycle when we have 4 gospels, no idea. Makes no sense to me. Should have been a 4-year cycle. But anyway, so we have this 3-year cycle of readings. And there are some stories that, because they're only in one of the gospels, only come up once every 3 years. There are other stories that there is some version of that story in, say, all 3 of the synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And for those stories, we get the version of the year every year. So every year on the first Sunday of Lent, the reading from the gospel is always the story of Jesus being tested in the wilderness by Satan, or by the devil. The only variation is, do we tell Mark's version of the story, Matthew's version of the story, or Luke's version of the story? We're in the year of Luke right now, so this morning we read Luke's version of the story. And I always find it a little bit challenging with these stories that we get every single year. It can be a little challenging to approach them fresh, and to let them really speak to us anew. And not that I feel a whole lot of pressure to have a brand new, totally fresh, totally hip and relevant and never before heard, brand new, brilliant insight into the story every time. But I think sometimes even, just truths that we've heard before can be hard to hear again. Like our ears become numb, almost. Kind of like if you've ever been in a really loud environment for a long time, you walk out and your ears aren't necessarily really ringing, but they just feel a little numb. I think sometimes that happens to us with stories that we've heard um, over and over and over. We can lose sight of just how radical these stories were for their original audience. And the stories in the Gospels absolutely were very radical for their original audience. The Gospels were and are politically subversive literature. Um, and anybody who tells you that the Bible supports the status quo uh, hasn't read it very closely. In fact, does every ELCA Lutheran pastor have the same gospel every Sunday? Theoretically, yes. As always, there are like fine print and terms and conditions apply. In general, the vast majority of ELCA congregations use the Revised Common Lectionary. In fact, when I graduated from seminary, I would have said we all do, because it was really kind of like the only one out there. A few years ago, they introduced something called the Narrative Lectionary, which tries to tell the stories like beginning to end, like as a straightforward narrative instead of jumping around the way the Revised Common Lectionary does, because the Revised Common Lectionary tries to match the stories and the readings up with where we are in the church year. But yes, if we're all any Lutheran church that is using the Revised Common Lectionary, we're going to have the same gospel reading as the church down the street if they're using the RCL too. Now, the other caveat or like exception is we're not required to use the RCL. We're not required to use any lectionary technically. So for instance, next Sunday, this coming Sunday, if I wanted to, I could pick, I don't know, Mark chapter 15, the crucifixion of Jesus from the Gospel of Mark, and preach on that. Even though we're in the year of Luke and it's only the second Sunday of Lent, which is not typically when we read the story of the crucifixion. So we have that freedom to basically call an audible on the lectionary or use a different text if we want to. But for the most part, we use the assigned text for the day. Generally speaking, the only time I pull away from the lectionary and do something different is if there's like a special service going on, like say we're doing a series on a particular topic, like a stewardship series. If we're doing a stewardship campaign and we're encouraging people to think about generosity as part of their discipleship, then I might use something other than the assigned lectionary text for a couple of weeks as we look at biblical generosity. The other is if there's something really big going on in the life of the parish, I will pick a different text. In my previous call, when I was up in Pennsylvania, I'm in Pennsylvania now. When I was up in Lebanon County before I came here, I was part of a 4-congregation co-op. And one of the 4 congregations had decided that the co-op just wasn't working for them and they wanted to withdraw, which, okay, fair enough. And as we were getting closer to their sort of separation date, out of concern for them and where they were in their sort of communal anxiety level, I preached outside of the lectionary with them a couple of times. And, just as a reminder, because I felt it was more important to lift up those passages where we are promised God's enduring presence and care. Um, and so I veered away from the lectionary for them a couple of times. Um, at one point, I was preaching in a congregation that was very deeply conflicted. They had had a lot of conflict and fighting over the course of many years. And it was like the elephant in the room that they needed to learn how to address before they could really move forward on anything else. And they needed to like learn how to handle conflict in healthy ways. So one Sunday, I called an audible on the lectionary, so to speak. I always say calling an audible, which is a football term that some people don't get. But anyway, I veered away from the lectionary and I used Matthew chapter 18, verses 15 to 17, where Jesus talks about how do you handle conflict. Your neighbor sins against you, go to them when you are alone. Point out the fault. If they listen to you, then you have regained that one. If they don't listen to you, go back with one or two others as witnesses. If they won't listen to them, take it to the whole church. If they still won't listen, then let them be to you as a sinner and a tax collector. And, I preached on that text that day, and I said to them, I'm not going to tell you not to fight, because at this point you've been doing it long enough that it's kind of in your DNA. It's kind of where we're at right now as a community of faith. Is there's a lot of conflict and there's a lot of tension and there's a lot of just testiness. But while I'm here, I'm going to insist that if we're going to fight, let's fight like Christians, and that means that we're going to fight fair. And we're going to talk about doing it the way Jesus tells us to do it. I'm not going to line other people up to gang up on that other person. They're not going to line other people up to gang up on me. We're going to go talk to the person while we're alone. We're going to do that one-on-one. And we're going to approach that from the presupposition that the goal is reconciliation. That the goal is for us to be reconciled to one another, to live in peace with one another, to live in community with one another. Now, it may turn out that the hurt is too deep and we're not able to do that, but we are at least going to make the effort. And when we make the effort, whether it works or not, we're not going to write anybody off. And we're not going to demonize anybody. We're not going to cast aspersions on people, etc. Jesus said to them, if they still won't listen to you, let them be as a sinner or a tax collector to you, or a Gentile or a tax collector. Well, what did Jesus do with Gentiles and tax collectors? He welcomed them. He ate with them. He, ministered to their needs. He cared for them. And ultimately, he laid down his life for them. Well, then, what that tells me is that even if we have a conflict with someone that we can't reconcile, we still don't get to write them off. They're still a beloved child of God, which means they're still one of our siblings that we are responsible to care for. Now, sometimes the most loving and caring thing I can do for somebody is to leave them alone. And sometimes the most loving and caring thing I can do for somebody is to continue to pray for them from a distance. But I don't get to, wake up every morning and say, good morning, God, thank you for this beautiful day you've given me. Now go smite that SOB for me. Like, I don't get to do that. And thank goodness I don't, because man, I got enough stuff to carry around. I don't need to be carrying around grudges. And I can honestly say, I don't think I do carry any grudges. I learn from certain things. Um, and there are folks who I have a different relationship with after a conflict. Um, that's just a given. Like um, I think that's just a normal human reality. Um, but there's a difference between, okay, there's a scar here that needs to heal, and the relationship has changed and has shifted in some ways, um, versus I'm still as angry as I was when the incident happened. I'm good, Diz. Good to see you. Any news on the job interview front? And I'm assuming it's okay to ask that question here since you mentioned it here. If you don't want to answer it here, that's totally fine. Like, don't feel like you have to share your business everywhere. But um, I'm a big fan of good news on Sunday evenings. Ugh. Well, I can understand that. It's nerve wracking when you're waiting to hear. Sometimes I think the waiting is worse than uh, getting the answer we don't want. But I hope you're able to set aside the panic and, oh, cool. 6-week online community workshops on, I'm assuming, gender and sexuality stuff, but I don't want to assume. Um, I think we're so fortunate to have um, the kind of technology we do, to be living in an era when we can do so many of these things online and have these kinds of conversations. And don't get me wrong, I am I'm not a luddite, and I'm also not an uncritical fan of technology. Um, I think there are a lot of pluses and minuses to technology, and to social media and the internet in particular. Um, but uh, used well and used thoughtfully, I think it can be such an incredibly powerful tool for teaching and learning and broadening horizons and things. Sometimes we just gotta distract that unkind brain. I get it. Believe me, I get it. Um, there's times when I can't get that little bastard in the back of my head to shut up, so I go find other things to do. Um, makes perfect sense to me. Yep, definitely. Um, sometimes for me, that means going to the shop. Sometimes for me, that means uh, going out looking for I call it cruising for somebody to help. Um, the other thing that I have found with, you know, my wad of, bubblegum and baling wire inside my head is sometimes just going and doing something um, is enough. Yes. An activity that requires 110% of your attention. I think that that's true for me too, Ella. Um, Yeah, I can imagine quilting would help. Um, for me, I find that, and I think part of this might be ADHD brain, is sometimes just doing something with my hands is enough. Sometimes just going out to the shop and doing something with my hands is enough. And sometimes I need to not only be doing something with my hands in the shop, but I also need to have my earbuds in and be listening to something. And the something I'm listening to needs to not just be music or um, something I've heard 100 times. It needs to be like something fairly intellectually taxing that is like making me kind of work to follow it. Like it's almost like I have to wear my brain out. Ah, yeah. The choices we have to make about which things to keep with us. Sarah, that might be the most Sarah thing I've ever seen you say, and I am completely not surprised. Um, yeah, I got to say I am very grateful that my wife and mother-in-law have been so tolerant of me and my shenanigans. Um, that Where'd you come from, Melissa? Um, so when we moved into this house, the plan was that we were going to turn the downstairs. There was like a den uh, and an unfinished room that the previous owners were using as their home gym. Those got turned into my mother-in-law's lair. Um, and so that worked. And the other plan was that we were going to build a building separate from the house as a shop for me. And we have not quite gotten there yet. We got the concrete poured. I've got the kit for the building. Um, I need to just get it built, and hopefully this summer, knock on wood, we're actually going to get that done. I thought we were going to get it done last summer, and I wound up having shoulder surgery instead. So hopefully this summer we're going to get the shop built. And the main thing about that for me is I really need to get out of the garage. In part because it's just not ideal as a shop, but also um, I feel bad monopolizing the entire garage from my wife and my mother-in-law. Um, so like they can't bring their cars in when it snows um, because the garage is full of my woodworking stuff. So I have very limited experience of upstate New York, but I enjoyed what I did have. Gretchen and I, um, as seems to be fairly typical for us, we took like 3 or 4 years. We were married 3 or 4 years before we went on our honeymoon. But our honeymoon was a uh, road trip for a week through the Adirondacks, up through like Long Lake and Lake Placid and up to Burlington, Vermont, and then spent a day or two in Vermont and back down uh, through Vermont and the Hudson Valley on our way home. And that was a nice trip. I really enjoyed that. So I'm actually going to upstate New York this summer, near Utica, in fact, for a wedding that I will be officiating. And at least the last time I checked, the plan is still in place. I'm taking Gretchen and my youngest kid to Boston uh, in the summer. Um, Found out a couple of months ago that neither my wife nor my youngest have ever been to Boston, and it's one of my favorite cities ever. So uh, we're going to try to correct that lack. Um, Yeah, I really kind of fell in love with Boston when I was in the Navy. My first duty station was Newport, Rhode Island, which I did not fall in love with. Um, but the great thing about Newport, Rhode Island was it was only about an hour away from Boston. Um, and I wound up making some really good friends that lived in Boston and the Boston suburbs, Waltham. Um, so really enjoyed going up there. I've been to Boston, I don't know, probably close to a dozen times, but it's been a number of years now, so I'm looking forward to getting back up there. So I just got to say, I am tickled pink that like here, like three of my favorite queer people are just like chatting and getting to know each other here, and I'm just sort of like sitting over here babbling away, and that's fine. That's what I love about the way these lives work. Hello, Michelle. How are you? Doing pretty well. Just having a nice, quiet Sunday evening, and I'm looking forward to seeing you too, Diz. Cool, because I'm kind of a sticker junkie, and in fact, um, whoops. Of course, I don't have that coffee cup down here with me, but the one that you sent recently, the "You're Safe with Me" sticker, now has a very prominent place on the tall travel mug that I use most days. So this is my around the house mug. It's undecorated because it never really goes anywhere, so it doesn't need to dress up. Um, I like it. It just doesn't fit in any of my cup holders. Um, but the one that fits in the cup holder in my pickup goes with me everywhere. Yeah, I got the bright orange on purpose because nothing else in my workshop is bright orange. So hopefully this will stick out and I'll be able to see it when I'm looking for it. I haven't lost it in the shop yet, so that's a good sign. Well, it's a theory, it's a hope. Um, it's kind of crazy. I occasionally have to have Gretchen come down to the shop and I'll say, okay, I'm sure it's right in front of me and I just can't see it, but can you help me find fill in the blank? And sure enough, most of the time she spots it pretty quickly. Yeah, I firmly believe that like 90% of the reason that human beings partner up is to help us find shit we can't find, or like stuff we can't see that's right in front of us. Right? I In fact, I need to see about getting that written into the marriage vows. You know, love, honor, cherish, and help me find shit. Like that should be one of the vows. Aw, I'm glad you did too, Diz. I gotta say this community has been such a gift for me, um, which is ironic given how hard my wife and daughters had to bully me to even download the app. So, um, today is your 46th anniversary. Congratulations. That is a huge accomplishment. When a person passes who is trans, are they the gender they identify as in spirit and when they go to heaven? Um, that's beyond my pay grade. Um, so, and I say that not as a cop out, but simply as a preface that what I'm about to say is speculation on my part, um, based on my understanding of what it means to be trans and my understanding of like what resurrection, afterlife, etc., is all about. Um, so I believe that resurrection, whatever form that takes, um, is a matter of us being fully and completely who God created us to be. Like all of the stuff that gets in the way, right? All of the stuff that um, gets stuck to us gets stripped away, and I believe that happens for all of us, um, and we become most fully um, who and what God created and intended us to be. And so I believe, based on that, that um, trans people know who God created them to be, um, and that they live into that in its fullness and completeness, um, in whatever comes after this. Okay. Um, I'm not sure that our bodies have any bearing on the afterlife, except that um, Christianity has for 2,000 years kind of hung its hat on the idea of the resurrection of the body. Um, Good night, Melissa. I'm so glad you could join us, and I did not forget your message. I just have not been on this app much lately, so I will check my messages when I'm done here and see if we can set up a time to grab some coffee and chat. Um, so anyway, you know, we affirm that we believe in the resurrection of the body, but there's a lot of unanswered questions about what that means. Okay, so I mean the archetype or the template that we have is Jesus. You never asked, Sarah. I would be happy to sit down and have coffee with you. Um, I'd even drive to Baltimore to do it. Um, so the archetype that we have is Jesus, who post resurrection was recognizable to his disciples. Um, and his body was still recognizable in that they could see the wounds in his hands and feet. And yet, also, his body apparently did not have all of the limitations that our fleshly bodies have, because, like, they were in a room with a locked door, and the next thing they knew, he was standing there next to them. So, like, there's a lot of unanswered questions about the resurrection of the body. um, I do believe that bodies are holy, and I believe that we were created as bodily and corporeal beings. So like I push back against the theology that the church had for a long time that said um, spirit good, flesh bad. Spirit and soul good, body bad. Okay. Hello, sassy pants. Um, Paul talks about that distinction between the being in the flesh and being in the spirit, but he didn't quite mean it the way that some people have then taken that to say that anything physical is bad. I think our bodies do matter, and I think our bodies are holy, and our bodies are intended to be holy. But I also think um, we can trust trans people to know who they are, um, and to know who God created them to be. And so um, I have a beloved friend uh, who I met through TikTok, um, a young trans man named Milo, who is not with us anymore. And I am convinced that whatever's on the other side of this life, I will see Milo there and we will recognize each other. And he will be holy and whole and happy and as beautiful as he ever was. I think that's exactly right, Diz. I think that God embraces us in our full selves um, and declares our full selves holy and blessed. Yeah, that's right. Milo is how we met. So, Yeah, I think God believes in us feeling at home in our bodies. Um, and if your body's a temple, decorate the walls. Yeah. Stop it, Diz. You're going to have me crying about Milo soon. Um, it's funny. Um, I was having a conversation not too long ago with somebody. There are folks who uh, are uncomfortable with my occasional use of salty language on social media, and particularly on TikTok. Um, and and I get that. I get that. Um, Different people have different standards around that kind of language, and grew up with different standards around that kind of language, and whatever, and that's fine. I Fair enough. And a lot of folks are not comfortable with the idea of a member of the clergy who uses some of that salty language. And I get that too. Um, but I think for me, I draw a distinction between vulgar and obscene. Okay. When I start throwing around f bombs, like that's vulgar. Okay. And it is crass and it is crude and it is not the kind of thing you do in polite society. And I would never ever talk that way, for instance, in the pulpit, right? Um, it is not, however, obscene. To me, obscene is um, harassing a young trans man to the point that he takes his own life. Um, that's obscene. Um, the clown who tweeted the day after the election, uh, "Dear women, your body, my choice." That's obscene. Um, there are times when a well placed f bomb, or even a well laid carpet of f bombs, um, is in fact holy speech in my mind. Um, and there is such a thing as holy anger. Um, and there are things in this world that happen every single day that should make us um, wholly angry. Um, to me, I occasionally will ask people, why are you more upset about me saying that something is fucking bullshit than you are about the thing that is actually fucking bullshit, right? Um, if um, you know, if I say that it's fucking bullshit that Pennsylvania is the only state remaining in the northeastern United States where you can be fired or evicted from your home simply for being LGBTQ plus, um, like me saying that that is fucking bullshit. Me saying those two words doesn't hurt anybody. Like nobody's harmed by that. People being evicted from their home or fired from their job simply for being who they are harmed by that. So why are we more upset about salty language in reference to the actual harm being done than we are the actual harm being done? That's the part that I don't get. Like, you know, if you don't like those words, that's fine. And I try not to use those words around people who don't like them. Um, you know, I try to make sure that if somebody is going to be offended by my language, it's somebody that I wanted to offend, or at least that I'm okay with offending. Like, I mean, there's some people in this world who I'd very much like to offend. I hope that they are offended by me. There are other people in this world who I don't go out of my way to offend, but I don't really care if they're offended, right? And there are other people who I make it an effort not to offend because, I just do. Because I care about them, and I'll do my best not to um, offend those folks. Um, but to me, homophobia is far more offensive. Transphobia is far more offensive. Um, a teenager telling me that I am the first Christian they ever met who didn't tell them they were an abomination, that's offensive. The fact that they could live in this Christian nation, America, for 17 years, and every Christian they ever encountered told them, maybe not specifically to them, but basically said, you're an abomination because gay people are an abomination, not knowing that this kid was gay. You know, there are people who have been told every day of their lives that they are beyond the reach of God's love. That's obscene. There are people in this country, children in this country, who will go to bed with empty stomachs tonight. That's obscene. And I wish we were more offended by that than we were by the word fuck. Just, just my humble opinion. Yeah, Jesus certainly got salty. I can't think of a case where he would have used a word that, we would have considered salty language, but the Apostle Paul did. It's cute how our translations dance around it, but yeah, Paul used the Greek equivalent of a four-letter word, and for those of us who happen to be Lutherans, man, Martin Luther. If people think my language is salty, and don't go read Luther's writings. The girl you talked about was saved, but also died from suicide. Do I think they go to heaven? Absolutely. And I think it has nothing to do with our ideas of quote unquote saved. Um, I think it is, a question of God's desire is to bless and save the entire cosmos. Um, and I certainly don't believe that if someone is in so much pain and despair that they end their own life, I definitely don't believe that God punishes people for being in pain. And I don't believe God punishes people for despair. There was this horrible theology that grew up in the church in the Middle Ages, in part to counteract. Suicide was seen as an honorable act in some pagan societies, like the Romans. Um, and as a reaction against that and against paganism, and also as a reaction against the idea of taking one's own life, or ending one's own life, the church developed this theology that said that suicide was bad and suicide is a sin, and that's fine. But then carried that further to suicide is an unforgivable sin because you can't repent from it and confess it and do your penance for it. And so, therefore, people who end their own life go to hell forever, for eternal conscious torment, which is just rancid. That just rancid theology, absolutely rotten, vile. And the idea that um, people who um, died by suicide couldn't be buried in consecrated cemeteries or on holy ground, or that if they did, the other people buried there wouldn't rest. Like, oh, absolutely vile, and all about trying to scare people who are already in mental and spiritual agony, scare them into not dying. Oh yeah. You Oh, Chloe, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Oh, okay, Diz. I absolutely get it. Have a good night. Okay. Uh, yeah, and this topic I forgot. Um, just got my live um, just got my audience restricted for the live. I forgot I can't use the S word um, in a live. Um, it's so stupid the way we have to dance around certain topics. I mean, it's one thing to be cautious around topics for people's safety and well being. It's ridiculous that because TikTok polices itself with algorithms, you can you can say all kinds of horrible things to somebody as long as you don't use the wrong keywords. Good for you, Shadow Wolf. I hope it goes well. Um, so somebody asked for um, a quick summary of but I'm not sure what they wanted a quick summary of. Um, Golden, I'm not sure what you wanted a quick summary of. If you were looking for a quick summary of the use of naughty no-no words in Scripture. Um, oh, just asking who Martin Luther was. Yeah, so a reformer of the church in the 1500s, the granddaddy of Lutheranism. Go figure. Um, Good luck, Mark. Sleep well. I hope you get some good rest, and I hope it's not too crazy. Howdy, Becky. Hey, Dallas. Good to see you. So people were asking about. I am doing well. I hope you are too. Um, how's my favorite part-time mermaid? Um, so the four-letter words in or the naughty no-no words in Scripture. Back to work tomorrow after spring break. Good luck. So in Philippians 3:8. Philippians 3, this is where Paul is kind of laying out his credentials, and he's talking about how if anybody has reason to brag about their sort of spiritual pedigree, he does. Um, if anyone else has reason to be confident in the flesh, I have more. Circumcised on the eighth day, a member of the people of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew born of Hebrews, as to the law, a Pharisee, as to zeal, a persecutor of the church, as to righteousness under the law, blameless. Yet whatever gains I had, these I have come to regard as loss because of Christ. More than that, I regard everything as loss because of the surpassing value of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord. For his sake, I have suffered the loss of all things, and I regard them as rubbish in order that I may gain Christ and be found in him. Rubbish is a very watered down translation of the word there. The word there in Philippians chapter 3, verse 8, is scubala. And scubala is there's no way to dance around it. It's the Greek word for shit, and carries the same connotations. Um, you know, he's not talking about garbage or junk I need to clean out of the garage here. Um, he's talking manure or dung. So Good night, sweetie. I'll be up in a minute. That's actually, I think, a pretty good cue for me to call it a night. It's been a little over an hour this evening, so. Oh, thank you, Sarah. I'm glad. Um, Not to make a shameless plug, but I'll make a shameless plug. You can always go watch the service from my congregation. We did live stream it on YouTube this morning. It's on my church's YouTube channel. Actually, in two parts this time because we lost power halfway through the service. But good night, Golden. But anywho, Thanks everybody for being here. Um, these Sunday evening conversations are a good reset for me before I launch into the new week. I am thankful for all of you. Uh, and I hope you have a beautiful and blessed week, that you are richly blessed and that you are able to be a blessing to others. And I hope above all that you will remember that you matter, you are precious, you are valid, and you are deeply and profoundly loved. Good night. Make my mama cry.